Are we on,
season 4 on DVD last
Are we on Netflix yet? That's what I want to know. But you are watching Gold and Black Live, and like I said, it's the earliest show ever because Purdue will be playing its earliest home football game ever when it starts against Northwestern a week from yesterday. Matt Stevens, Brian Neubert. Matt Stevens, the new guy in the crowd. We'll talk to Matt, get to know him a little bit better as you'll get to know him well as you read his work on our site. We also want to thank our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn. When tomorrow's a big day, stay at HGI tonight. State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. He got to work that big West Side Jeff game last week, did a great job doing that. And, of course, Triple X on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. Kerry and Greg Ayersman, great friends of the show. And John Basham and Basham Reynolds, they are busy as it busy as beavers? Yeah, I think that's what it is. They are really busy right this time of year getting all the students situated as Purdue is in its first week of school. I don't know. Brian, I'll start with you. Having a hard time getting used to the idea that Purdue's playing football Thursday, but we've had fair warning. It is August 30th, and the Boilermakers will be taking on Northwestern. Let me get your initial thoughts, and then we'll go to Matt.
Well, first off, you can also go with bees on that because of these similarities between the two species.
And alliteration too, right?
Existences. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's been kind of a long off season, one of a lot of expectations around Purdue. It's going to be a really tough act to follow. I think I've kind of beaten that into the ground a little bit here where, Purdue last year took the bar from here to here very quickly. And now when you look at what's at stake, and what's at stake is kind of their momentum, their upward trajectory. And that stuff has mattered so much because of the fan engagement, because of the recruiting. And now, Purdue goes into the season with expectations, with, I guess, the challenge of, having to handle success after the majority of this team had experienced none.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of underlying dynamics here this season that are going to make it a particularly interesting one.
Matt, you've been around the block covering Mississippi State, covering Auburn, and now up here at Purdue. A Midwest guy, though, graduate of Eastern Illinois and lived in Central Illinois. What does this feel like for you? I mean, Auburn is big boy football. Mississippi State's big boy football. Purdue is, I think, getting to that level. But how does this feel? This early bit of touch around the Boilermaker football program?
Yeah, with you and Brian talking, it's my season one. So but with Purdue, I think that there's this intrigue of can they build on last year and can they start to become relevant in the Big Ten West? And are they going to be the team in the Big Ten West that challenges Wisconsin for that high number one in the hierarchy in that division? And it seems like it's wide open from 2 to 7 in that division at this point. And Purdue, after going to a bowl game for the first time and God knows when, and having experienced what they did in the Darrell Hazel era, Jeff Brom just brings this new excitement and new energy to everywhere around the program, whether it's in the facility, out in the community, out in practice. There just seems to be this new excitement about Purdue football, and it has everything to do with the head coach. You talk to recruits, they all talk about Jeff Brom and what we want to go play for him, and I think that's what's the thing about that kind of makes Purdue similar to all the other schools that I've covered, is that they bring in a new head coach. And he just brings in a new kind of community and a new kind of atmosphere to the program, and it just kind of changes like that.
Yeah. Any similarities of guys you've been around just in terms of personality in the SEC? Is there anybody that he and Jeff is kind of an SEC area, is an SEC area guy, obviously from Louisville, but anybody that jumps off the page and says, boy, he's a lot like this guy.
In a lot of ways, with the John Wayne type swagger, the offensive, genius kind of play calling, he reminds me a lot of the early Dan Mullen.
Yeah.
But I do think the difference is that Jeff seems a little bit more realistic, a little bit more honest with himself and with everybody else surrounding his program when he talks to us and when he talks to the public about Purdue football. He understands that it takes time, and nothing's going to change just because Jeff Brom's name is on the mantle of the head coach office. But I still think he feels like I can out scheme everybody, and I can go out recruit everybody. And there's this John Wayne type mentality of how many trick plays he wants to run and what kind of innovative stuff he wants to do on that side of the ball. that it reminds me a lot of the early years of Dan Mullen at Mississippi State, when he just kind of thought he could come in and 40 points would go on the board just because of how I scheme it up and how we do it from a passing standpoint and from an offensive standpoint.
You know, Brian, and when you get to coaches in the second year, and there is a maturation, there's something that you do to get used to where you are. Jeff Brom seems to have done that extremely quickly just from the moment he set foot on here. But you know, you've been around a lot of coaches also. I mean, what makes him give you that potential for being very, very special? What are the things that you think will drive this program moving forward?
Well, I think all the things we said when he was hired all continue to hold true. Offensive identity,
Yeah.
playing style identity matter. You have something, people know what they're going to expect from your program. You coach a certain way. You have an identity. Purdue for a decade didn't have an identity. Now they have an identity that they're going to do all sorts of stuff on both sides of the ball, and they're going to think outside the box. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at everybody, and they're going to play very aggressive. And he seems to have that ability to get things out of his players that maybe people who've watched them before didn't think
Could happen,
was
yeah.
there to be extracted. I think he's supremely confident, but I also think he's supremely pragmatic. I think he's obviously a very intelligent football person, and I just think all of those things kind of manifested themselves in year one into year three type success. And that's what I was getting at before, is now the bar has gone from the ground floor to the third floor, and now that's the standard. And there are very reasonable scenarios in which Purdue is stronger as a program through the course of the season, but wins fewer games.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they win fewer games because I think they're going to struggle this year. I say they win fewer games because 7's a big number.
Yeah, 7 is a big number. We looked at the schedule, and you look at the way the schedule lays out, and obviously Purdue's by some ranked as high as the second most difficult schedule in the country. But you look at, from a Vegas perspective, if Purdue may be a favorite in 7, 8 games, maybe. It depends how you look at it, but they're going to be tight. I mean, there isn't any, there aren't any layups in there. Maybe the exception of Eastern Michigan, but Eastern Michigan's program has gotten much, much better. And the worst thing you can do in this program right now is to count victories. I mean, and that's I think Jeff Brom's attention to detail, nose to the grindstone. Every time you hear him talking, he's talking about focus. Hey, people, didn't take us seriously last year. They still aren't. I mean, is that the mantra as much as anything?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Brian. I think there is a scenario in which Purdue could be a better football program, actually even be a better football team than they were last year, and still only win 6 regular season games. And you think at that point, and the difference from where I'm coming from is that a lot of fans just immediately think, well, we're just spinning our wheels in mud here. And I don't think Purdue fans feel that way. I think Purdue fans will feel like 6 wins again will be a successful season. 7 wins will be a successful season. They're not looking to go from 7 to 9 wins. It's not like we have to keep the ball rolling here. It's that if the ball continues to go in the direction it was last year, then we see that as a success. And I think that Jeff Brom didn't have to convince fans of that. When you win 9 games over a 4-year period, I think fans are just desperate for any kind of success. Postseason bowl game, no matter where it is considered a success right now here at Purdue. And I think Jeff Brom feeds off of that type of energy right now when he's trying to build a program.
Yeah.
Let's look at the margins last year, too, as it pertains to this year's margin for error. 1997, Joe Tiller comes in with an offense that obliterated every bad team on the schedule. And that was a weak schedule. And that's why they were able to have the success they had, because if Ohio State and Michigan were on that schedule, things probably would have been 2 games different. That was domination in a lot of ways. What Purdue did last year, they won close games on defense a couple of times. They won on effort, they won on scheme, as Jeff Brom says, to the point of cliche, but when cliche is true, it's not cliche, I guess, about finding a way to win at the end. And that's exactly what they did more often than not.
Right.
Purdue didn't blow everyone out of the water last year, and 7-6 was still 7-6.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, 7-6 is a 54% winning percentage. It's not like you're there. But what my point is that Purdue skated by last year to get the wins it got in a lot of ways. So for anybody to look at this as like, well, Purdue is there to the point where they can count wins against teams they're going to be favored against. I don't think that's the case.
I think the
at
game
this
that's
point.
my biggest is that Missouri game. Your team you just absolutely hammered. It looked like Missouri last year should have fired Barry Odom right after the game. They got better. Now they didn't beat a lot of teams, but they did win games, and that's a game you win by 32 points on the road. Really one of the more impressive efforts by a Purdue team on the road in a long time. And you say, well, September 15th, that won't be difficult. Think again.
I think what my point was there was that Purdue has to keep doing that,
Right.
all that little stuff Braum talks about.
Yeah.
They won last year largely on substance, and that substance can't subside as they learn to deal with success. With the Missouri thing, I think, a lot of that was catching Missouri at the right time. I think a lot of it was the element of surprise that kind of was an overlying theme over Purdue's whole season. Now, I don't think the element of surprise is ever totally spent, but I think everybody now is wary of what Purdue is. And when the kitchen sink gets thrown at them, they're going to have their hands up to protect their face. So, again, what this season comes down to is just being fundamentally sound, no turnovers, no injuries, and that effort that made Purdue what it was last year. That all sounds so uninteresting. But uninteresting in this case is completely true, because Purdue, isn't to the point where they're just going to go out there and score 40 points against everybody and hold them to 20.
Right, and what I'll add to that is that when Purdue loses 7 or 8 starters on defense, and Jeff Brom shows up at Big Ten Media Day in Chicago and says, I really like our defense. I think we're going to be really good on defense. When you win 7 games in your first year, you get the credibility to say things like that and have people believe you. If Purdue goes 3-9 last year, and Jeff Brom says, I really like our defense, even though we're only bringing back 3 starters, nobody's going to buy into that yet. But when they saw what happened last year with Nick Holt, and they saw what happened with Jeff Brom rebuilding this program, he gets to say stuff like that before they ever kick off the 2018 season and have people go, well, maybe the defense is better than I thought, and maybe we aren't going to have to win shootouts. And I think that, to add to what Brian said, that's going to have to be how Purdue wins ball games.
Yeah, find a way to decide. Yeah, I think it's interesting in Jeff Brom, who I think is more strategic than I had anticipated when he got here for a couple of reasons. I think I like his hype machine because he has really gone almost above and beyond the call with Rondale Moore on the Big Ten shows, but also just talking about a guy that hasn't played it down yet is obviously very, very impressive.
Well,
there are other reasons behind that, though, that come to what?
He's speaking to recruits in Louisville.
There you go. Okay.
But, I mean, that isn't to say that Rondale Moore hasn't been everything I thought he'd be and more. To me, Rondale Moore, I thought he was a gimmick. I thought he was a guy who comes in, plays 15 snaps a game, runs probably a total of 5 plays all year long. To me, he looks like an every down sort of guy, a guy you can put out there in any situation and he can be productive for you. He's not a trick play, one-trick pony sort of guy. He is legitimate. He is a guy who's going to have the best, most productive year Purdue's had a freshman wide receiver have, and I can't even remember who the last one would be.
Dorian Bryant, maybe. I don't know. We were talking about that earlier. But
he's that level
we'll ask
of
Mr.
talent.
Mr. Newton's in the wings. He can answer that.
He's that
one
level
shortly.
of talent, and
Yeah.
he seems to carry himself like an adult. So I don't think the trappings of immaturity, the trappings of inexperience are necessarily going to apply to him the way they would apply to most in his position.
But I do like Jeff Brom's approach towards, we're going to hype a little bit, and then we're going to rip your rear end in practice a little bit. Then we're going to, he's kind of bouncing back and forth, but there's a certain credibility about way he goes about his business that seems to work.
When he has a close scrimmage, he could have come and told us everything's great. We had great offensive possession.
You're talking
We had
about
no
last
turnover.
Saturday, yeah.
I'm talking about last Saturday, and I'm
Yeah.
talking about the first scrimmage too, because he's really tough on this defense. He's really tough on his quarterbacks. The standard is a lot higher than it ever has been at Purdue. But he came to us and said, God, we were really bad. We were really, really bad. And this is less than 12 days before they're going to play in Northwestern on national television to open up the season. And he's got a level of standard that if they don't meet, he has no problem walking over to the media and telling them exactly what he thought happened. And then a couple of days later, watching the film and going, it really wasn't that bad. And I think that's what I like about the way that he kind of approaches coaching his players right now that are specifically really young.
How much of that, though, is message sending and calculation on Brom's part in your view?
It's certainly some of it, but I think he's the sort, too, to expect perfection and hope to get something in the ballpark of it, knowing you can never get it. I do think he is very detail-oriented. He is very meticulous. He is probably Spurrier-like with his quarterbacks, although probably not,
Nobody
engaging
quite.
in psychological warfare with them.
Yeah.
But I do think he is very demanding, especially of his offense. And I think every little detail really does matter to him. And he's surrounded himself with people that harp on details. And details are what has made him good, because you don't run an offense the way he's historically run offenses without this inch on this route making this much difference.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think he's that sort of meticulous,
Yeah.
and I just very, very demanding, and I think it's obviously worked for him.
Yeah, Matt, before we go to break, body language on this team, they look, and I'm gauging a little bit of this off of what I've seen on television as well, but look like they're a group that is having fun under this demands. You find them loose when or how do you think the players' body language is in terms of when you watch them?
I think fun is definitely the word that you use around Purdue football right now. I think when they do it at least close to the way that Jeff wants it done or the way that Nick Holt wants it done on defense, it can be fun. And they are flying around, and they have a lot of options that they can use on both sides of the ball. When they don't, I second what Brian said. I've seen Jeff Brom literally yell at a kid for 2 minutes straight because he lined up a half an inch off the line of scrimmage to where he wanted. I mean, in the open practice sessions. That's how meticulous he is. That's how meticulous Nick Holt is. If you don't line up properly before that, he'll stop the whole drill. He'll stop the whole team segment and tell that guy to move 2 inches to his left. And that's kind of where this coaching staff is right now. But they can make it fun if they do it exactly or close to the way that they see it, how it should work.
All right. Well, this will be an ongoing storyline. We'll have much more over the football season from these two guys, as it's going to be very, very interesting. We're going to take a 2-minute break, bring in the voice of Purdue football, Tim Newton, and Tim Bryan and I will try to ask some different questions than we asked in the first segment, which is always a challenge. And we'll take a couple of minute break and be back on Gold and Black Live.